Hey y'all, my name is Kayla and welcome to my cozy chaotic corner of the internet. Well, 2024 has come and gone and is in the rear view mirror. But that doesn't mean we can't reminisce on the good times, but especially the bad times. If you read the title of this video, then you know that these are my worst reads of 2024. Now, before we hop into things, just know this is completely all my own personal opinion. If you love these books, I love that for you. And to be honest with you, most of these books were hate reads, which honestly, I love a good hate read. Here's the thing. If I am not enjoying a book, like enjoying the experience of reading a book, I'm just gonna DNF it. I am not one to sit around and try and force myself through a book. I will DNF books left, right, and center. But sometimes you just find a book where you're like, okay, either I'm gonna like this, or inevitably I'm gonna get to the end of the book and be like, I hated that whole experience, but I loved it so much. And that's what most of these books are. So even though ultimately I didn't end up enjoying the books, I enjoyed the experience of hating the process. If that makes any sense. I might be a little sadistic with that sentiment. Let's not waste any more time. Let's hop into my worst books of 2024. And speaking of rear view mirrors, Murder Road by Simone St. James. Oh, Simone St. James. We have a checkered past, to say the least. I have read 3 of her books at this point. The very first book I read of hers was actually last year, and that was the Book of Cold Cases. I really enjoyed the first half of that book. And then the second half, oh my god, I couldn't stand it. It was a total snooze fest. We delved into the storyline of our ghost character in the second half of that book, and I was just like, what? It's over? Okay, cool. Then I read Murder Road this year and hated it with a fiery, burning passion. I do have an entire video dedicated to my experience of this book, but long story short, I felt like the main character was just so extremely vapid. She didn't care about anyone but herself, but she acted like she cared about other people. And honestly, I don't even think she liked her husband. Like their whole shtick was they had just gotten married, they were on their honeymoon, and anytime she talked about him, it was like, do you even like this guy? Why did you marry him? What is going on here? And the unfortunate part is like the side characters of this book I really enjoyed, but the fact that the entire book was from the point of view of the main character, no. No. But thankfully, Simone St. James did, swing things back around for me personally with The Broken Girls. I enjoyed the book. It was a little bit of a snooze fest, but compared to the Book of Cold Cases and especially Murder Road, I was like, I can get on board and enjoy this book. Unfortunately, Murder Road was Simone St. James's 2024 release. Let me know in the comments down below, did you read Murder Road and did you like it? Because everyone I've seen talk about this book, it has nothing wonderful to say about it. But maybe the algorithm just knows that I'm not a fan of Murder Road. Next book that I want to get off the list is The Wedding Party. I'm including this book on my worst reads of 2024 because it had so much potential. I was enjoying where it was going, but at some point it's like the author lost the plot. The story is about a woman who I believe is an FBI agent, at the very least a detective of some sort, and she is dragged along on this bachelorette party weekend. It's like a combined, just everyone's having a good time together situation. And she is brought by one of her friends. The entire time you're like, okay, this could be going somewhere. This is interesting. The husband-to-be ends up dead, and his fiance is suspected as the killer because she is found naked, covered in blood. Very bizarre. And the story starts out with like this one plot point, like this one element where we start with someone not even related to the main story, but like they receive this box and it's a very ominous thing. And I'm like, ooh, this is interesting, very intriguing. Where are we going with this? And I don't know where we went with that. Like, I'm pretty sure towards the end it was somehow loosely tied in, but not very well. And towards the end of the book, it just felt like it was like bing, bang, boom, boom, bam. Everything's figured out and solved. There was no twists and turns. Like, the best part of the book was literally probably like the first third. And then after that, just. I don't know what happened. Really don't know what happened. So that was the wedding party. It was just kind of like, okay, that was a book that we read. Next on the list of worst books of 2024 is a classic, Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. And the reason that this book is on this list is because of how disappointed I was with Northanger Abbey. The crazy thing is, I feel like so many people, the people who love Jane Austen, seem to love her entire catalog of books. And I love Jane Austen. Loved Pride and Prejudice. Oh my god, I need to reread that book. Mansfield Park, I had a really great time. But Northanger Abbey? It's the shortest of the books, and it was just terrible. It's supposed to be a satire on Gothic romances, but I don't know. I think we took the satire a little too literal. The main character, she was so annoying, so full of herself. Her love interest, what the one that she was really interested in, was just a total douche canoe. I couldn't stand him. And then the other guy who was pursuing, I'm so sorry, I'm not saying anyone's names because I quite honestly can't remember any of them. But then there's another guy who's pursuing Catherine, and he, at first, I went back and forth on him. Initially, I was like, who is this douchebag? I don't, what? And then he started to grow on me just because I think I hated her interest, her crush, the guy she was interested. I just disliked him so much that I was like, okay, this other guy's like, he's kind of being all right. But by the end of the book, I hated every single character. I hated them all. I was so devastated by this book. So I need to know, if you read Northanger Abbey, did you like it? Did you enjoy it? Because, again, I understand it's supposed to be a satire on Gothic romances, so I think, like, the characters are supposed to be over the top, but there were really no redeeming qualities in any of them, and even in an over-the-top satire, you should at least like one of the characters. There should be redeeming qualities about at least somebody. And that just didn't happen in Northanger Abbey. And I'm so devastated that this is on my worst books of 2024. But it is. Here we are. The next book on this list. I feel like this might be shocking to some. And the reason that this book is on this list is because this book was so hyped up by so many people, but don't come for me in the comments. Don't. If you love this book, I love that for you. But for me, first and foremost, too much of this book is reference to 80s songs. And if you don't know the song and you're reading the book, it just doesn't make sense. And in the audiobook, it was just annoying to listen to all these song references. Like, there's literally a section where this girl is just screaming the song. We have these two girls who are like best friends for life, right? And there's like the poor friend and then there's the rich friend. And the rich friend, she ends up being possessed by some sort of demon thing. And the entire book is pretty much just her the demon, I should say, sabotaging the entire friend group in high school. This does get pretty graphic and pretty gruesome and pretty grim. That part was interesting. And then you get to the part of the actual exorcism, and that was just kind of like, what the heck is going on? I feel like the sequence of events is taking way too long. And then you get to the aftermath of, like, now the rich friend is better, like the demon has been expelled because of the power of love, like the love of friendship. And the way the book ends, here's the thing, y'all. So, like, this is the same thing for another book that's on this list, but sometimes you just need to end the book at the end of the main sequence of events. Like, after the exorcism, after the trial, just be like, and life went on. You don't need to give us this long chapter or this soliloquy of how you kind of fell out of friendships or how you kind of, like, came back together over the years of life. These were teenagers, and we technically ended this book with them in, like, their 40s, 50s, I don't know, later in their years, and I'm just like, we didn't need that. We could have just ended with them meeting up again after all of the craziness and, like, driving off into sunset. That's where this book should have ended, and it didn't. And I just think that authors need to learn how to rein it in and know when to end a book. So with that noted, we're gonna hop into probably the biggest controversy on this list, and that's Funny Story by Emily Henry. I was enjoying this book. I was enjoying it the entire time. I had this sentiment. Oh my god, y'all, if this book has a third act breakup, that's like the one storytelling mechanism I hate in books. I cannot stand when there's a third act breakup. And it's always because of miscommunication. It's always because these adults can't have, like, a genuine conversation to try and figure out, hey, this weird situation that happened, let's talk about it. No, they just ignore each other. And then, like, months, weeks, years later, they get back together and they're like, hey, that one thing, yeah, it was actually, like, so not a problem. If this book has that, I'm going to lose my ever-loving mind. I just need y'all to know that this book probably wouldn't have made it onto this list if it weren't for the fact that there was a final chapter. If the book had ended at the second to last chapter, where it pretty much is our two main characters, they get back together after their third act breakup. If they had just gotten back together and it just was like Daphne, who's our main character, reminiscing on what the potential of her future would have, I think that was a very beautiful ending. On her being like, her whole thing is she, throughout the entire book, says, I don't like surprises. And the last few sentences in the second to last chapter is her being like, I'm excited and I can't wait to see what surprises life brings me, is pretty much the sentiment that second to last chapter has. And then the last chapter is like a year down the road. And I'm like, we don't need this year down the road element. Like, we really don't need it. I don't need to know that she's reconciling her relationship with an estranged friend. I don't need to know that everyone's coming over for a housewarming party. I don't need to know that her and Miles bought a house together. I don't need to know all these things because it just, like, dragged on the end of the book. Like, if that last chapter wasn't in the book, it would have been a good book. Like, I would have enjoyed that book. But because I hated that last chapter so much, it made me think back on all of the little points and details that I didn't like throughout the book. And once I stockpiled all those details up, I was like, I hated this book. This was not an enjoyable book. It had, like, some alright elements to it, but all in all, like, why is everyone obsessed with this book? And my biggest grievance and the biggest, like, knee-jerk reaction I had while reading this book was finally our two main characters are like on the same page, right? The entire time it's always been like they're just a chapter off. They're just like, they just have to turn one page and they would have been on the same page, but someone else was just a little bit ahead in the book. And finally they are on the same page of what they want this relationship to look like. And Miles, our main character, just trauma dumps on her. Just out of nowhere is like, here are all my grievances with my past, my history, and because of all these grievances, we are now in two completely separate different books. Like, we aren't even in the same chapter. We're not in the same universe. You're in one dimension and I'm in another. And it's like, what in the Marvel universe is going on here? That was like my biggest grievance, but at the time of reading it, I was like, okay, maybe I could just get past this. Maybe I can just get past this. And I was starting to get past it, and then we got that final chapter, and I was like, no, I hated that part. And if you read that part and you were like, no, this is perfectly fine, it makes it... Please explain. Like, I need to know what about that specific scene. You have to know what scene I'm talking about if you read this book. What about that specific scene was like cute and romantic and totally fine? I need to know. But yeah, Funny Story by Emily Henry. Worst books of 2024 for me, personally. Okay, y'all. So I know we've been on a roller coaster. We've been on some ups. We've been on some downs. We've had some good times. We've had some bad times. But I have to tell you that this book right here was my favorite hate read of 2024. I could not stand this book. The entire time I was consuming this book, I was like, do I like this book? Do I like this book? I don't know. I don't know. The very first sentiment that popped into my head when I finished this book, I hate this book. I hate this book. I hate this book. This book does have its own dedicated video, so feel free to check it out. I go into detail. I go into length. I tell you every little thing you could possibly want to know about why I hated this book. West Heart Kill by Dan McDorman. I don't want to give much spoilers, but let me tell you what this book is about. This book is about a cast of characters that are all experiencing life in a Hamptons-esque place. And the entire book is told to you by a narrator. The entire story is narrated. And that is why the entire time I was like, do I like this style? Do I like how this book is being presented to me? But the narrator, we find out, is Dan McDorman, the author, the writer. And the reasoning that Dan gives us for killing off certain characters over other certain characters was because he can. And in that moment of the final chapter, when he says, this person was killed off because I wanted to kill him off, I was done with the book. Anyways, y'all, those are my worst books of 2024. I will see you next week with my best books of 2024. I think we're going to have a good time next week. I mean, I had a good time this week because I just love roasting books. I love being petty. I love being a little snarky. I also really enjoy ranting and raving about things that I love. So I hope to see you guys there. Let me know in the comments down below, what were some of your worst reads of 2024? Do you also enjoy hate reading as much as I enjoy hate reading? Because sometimes that experience is just as fun as like digging in your hands into a book that you're absolutely loving. So, with all of that, I'll see you guys in the next one.